Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour to be a part of the program. It's a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 1-855-450-6624 or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host, delighted to be here with you this hour as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. This is our community night. It's a special night dedicated to those of you who are our faithful listeners. Everyone from the JB crowd to the KEQQ crowd to the sole AskNoahShow.com listeners. We're happy to have you. You can be a part of the show in a number of different ways. You can, of course, give us a call on our toll-free line, 855-450-NOAH. You can email us, live@asknoahshow.com. Join us in our interactive chat room, which, by the way, we're trying something new tonight. You can join us on Freenode tonight, pound Ask Noah Show. More information later in the hour about a drawing that's going to come up on Wednesday during our 100th edition of the Ask Noah Show episode. We'll bring that information to you later as the show goes on. Right now, I want to welcome our Mumble Room, mumble.jupiterbroadcasting.org. There, you too can add your voice to the conversation. Hey, Mumble Room, how are we doing?
Hey there.
I'm doing great.
Hey,
Just fine.
Hey, what a turnout. There's some people I don't get to talk to very often, so this is going to be really exciting. So, anyway, thanks for being here. Mumble Room tonight, because it's community night, I'm just leaving you guys on, so you can just jump in there anytime. Usually the format is, ping us in the chat room, and then I know to go to you guys. But like I say, community night, everything flies. Anybody can talk anytime they want. We're kind of just kicking back and doing loose with the structure a little bit. So one of the things that I think is lacking on the Ask Noah show, completely my fault, it's something we haven't done a very good job with, is, oh, by the way, it's pound Ask Noah Show, not anything else. So just so we know. One of the things that I think that we have not done a particularly good job with is feedback on the show. People write in all the time. Now, I read almost all of the feedback that comes into the show. I don't, however, read it on the air because I'm confined to 1 hour during our week. And obviously, we've got a lot of content to get through since we only have 1 hour a week. Well, tonight, that's different, right? Because tonight, it's all about the community. It's all about you, the listener. So tonight, you direct the content. We've got some content prepared in case we run out. But if you have a question, we invite you to call. If you want to add your voice to the conversation and give your opinion about something, we invite you to do so. And of course, we're going to go through some of the email here. So the first piece of email I want to get to, this came in this week from Tyler. And Tyler says, "Hello, Noah. I just wanted to say thank you for the day of job shadowing a couple years back. I was able to ace my Microsoft project course by learning a ton from you and bypassing all of the MS services required with FOSS alternatives. It was a blast, and I also had a question, if you get a chance to answer my emails. I seem to do a good job of being busy during the evening, so I apologize for never calling in. This may be something you were going to get to soon. I know you had mentioned it briefly, and I would like to hear more about your security camera implementation, more specifically, the networking behind it. Are you using something like Ubiquiti's AirFiber? I'm interested about learning a little bit more about this product or something similar. I have assisted living office that is beyond 300 feet from our closet, and trenching fiber was estimated over $10,000. So I would like to hear the practical implementation that you experienced. I want to understand what I need to implement a similar solution. This is a two-part question. Could such a solution be practical to backhaul traffic to 18 residents' wireless devices? I'm also exploring the options to install guest wireless to these residents. So understanding if this would be practical, that would be great. This is a community-based assisted living building with a limited budgetary constraints. So thanks again for the show and everything you're doing to give back to the community. I really appreciate the primary focus of education." Well, first of all, Tyler, thanks for writing in. You're most welcome. And what Tyler is referring to when he's talking about the job shadowing, every so often, I would say we probably get one or two of these a month. Somebody writes in either via email or letter or stops by the shop and says, "Listen, I listened to the show. I know who you are. I, too, want to start the next Altispeed, or I am going to start my college career in IT or I'm going to go into a development field. I want to come and get real life experience from somebody who is doing it with open source, solving problems with open source. Can you help me? And will you let me just follow you around and just kind of learn what you guys do? Of course, we're always open to that. Certain things not being withstanding, one of which is your ability to pass a background check, because obviously we've got some security concerns. But barring those kinds of things, we're absolutely happy to have you come on out. And the only thing we're not able to do is we're not able to pay people. So I'd say every so often I'll get a letter or an email, or somebody will use the contact form and they'll say, could I come, would you hire me just for 6 or 8 months or something like that? And could I come work for you? Unfortunately, we're not able to do those kinds of things. And we try to get back to everybody that writes in and asks those kinds of questions. Unfortunately, I can donate all my time I want to on the Ask Noah Show. It gets a little bit difficult when people send things into the company, Altispeed Technologies, for us to get back to everybody. So if you're one of the people that have written in or called or something like that and asked about that, if you haven't heard back, that's probably wise, because we just don't have the staff to kind of answer those questions. But you're more than welcome to write in on the show or interact with me that way, and I'd be more than happy to see if we can get you scheduled or in or something like that. But we always love visitors, always welcome people to come with. So breaking apart Tyler's question just a little bit. The first question, what did we use for the networking back infrastructure? Well, that's a great question, Tyler. And the answer to that is yes, we did indeed use Ubiquiti's AirFiber products. Now, the nice thing about these Ubiquiti products are they are incredibly inexpensive. And so you can pick them up for just pennies on the dollar. They're also ridiculously easy to install. I had them, I think from the time the box showed up at my house until the time that I had an established 1 gigabit link was about, I'm going to say about 4 minutes. There's a web config on each device. You log into the built-in web page. You inform it about the other device. You plug some network cables into each end, and you've established a link, and it works phenomenally. They're incredibly reliable. The only time you run into a problem is when you want to stretch a long distance. Now, the advertised range of most of the Ubiquiti products, at least the NanoBeams, is 17 kilometers. And just using simple math, that means that translates to roughly about 10 miles, a little over that. And when you're going 10 miles, you have to consider the fact that these things have, the sector, for example, has about 120 degrees of a pickup angle that it can receive a signal from. But when you get out 10 miles, if you're off by even, it's 2 or 3 degrees, by the time you get to that end of the 10 miles, you're off by, multiple tens of feet. I'm not that great at math that I can do all of that in my head, but the point is, if you look out of a sector and you point your arms at about 120 degrees, you can get an idea how many feet the spread is, and obviously that cone goes out. The further out you are from that receiving device, the less the signal is going to be. And so you need to be relatively accurate when you're going out to these very long distances. And that's why when we went out to Oslo, Minnesota to set up this networking infrastructure, I actually flew in Mr. Chris DeLuca from West Virginia, because Chris has set these up all over the place. The guy is a true expert. He knows more about the Ubiquiti products than the people at Ubiquiti who make them. And he was able to he's able to just stand on a roof or look at a tower or a pole, and he'll just be able to tell you, that's going to work, that's not going to work. He doesn't need to do any measurements. He doesn't have to take any calculations or any readings, anything like that. He can just look at something and pretty much tell you if it's going to work or not. He was wrong in the right way. And when I say that, what I mean was he looked at something and said, that's probably not going to work. It did work. It just barely worked. We were able to get it. We weren't able to get the full 1 gigabit, but we were able to get close to 100 megs at a great distance. And we were just putting a single camera. So it turned out that link was going to be sufficient. But yeah, having somebody like that in your corner is great. I will tell you that CDC Solutions is not a cheap place to go if you need consulting in these kinds of things, but CDC Solutions is the right place to go when you need solutions in these kinds of things. So obviously, Tyler, if you're still in the area, go ahead and hit me up. You have my phone number. You can always shoot me an email and just say, this is what we're looking to do. And obviously we'd come out free of charge. We could take a look at it with you. If nothing else, we can point you in the right direction to how you would go implementing this solution. But that is what the back-end infrastructure looks like and kind of how we set that up. And one of the things that we did early on was we made sure to put a PoE switch next to each one of these pieces of network infrastructure. The idea being that we can remotely reboot and monitor all of these pieces of equipment without having to be on site. So if one of these links go down, we can look to where the last good link is and restart that PoE switch, restart the port, that whichever radio is malfunctioning, I guess, as it were, and we're able to reestablish that link, which we've actually done once or twice. Although I have to say, barring any power weirdness that occurs inside of the lines, so electrical voltage and all of that stuff varies just a little bit. Aside from that, we really haven't had any issues with those or the cameras. And of course, the cameras are also Ubiquiti. Great thing about those cameras, they establish an encrypted link between the camera and the DVR. And then the DVR, which is on site, establishes an encrypted link between it and the receiving device. Now, since the time that we talked about that on the Ask Noah show and now, Ubiquiti has actually come out with a new device, and they're calling it the CloudKey 2. And what the CK2 is it's essentially a small miniature network appliance server. And what the network appliance server does is it basically has all of the Ubiquiti services built into this single 1U device. And so you install this device into your network, and you're able to manage cameras, you're able to manage network infrastructure, and it acts as the NVR. And so you're able to record all of your footage from your cameras on this single device. Now, there are things I like about it and things I don't like about it. I like the fact that it's a cost-competitive 1U device that essentially manages your entire network. The thing that I don't like about it, one is, I'm not a big fan of putting all of your eggs in one basket. One of our selling points of our managed network services, and the reason that we go out and install some of this networking equipment, is because we tell clients, hey, if you're a business, you should not have your cable modem, your router, your switch, and your access point all in one device and call that your router. Because that's what a lot of people have. They have those 4 or 5 devices in one single unit, and they call it a router. And then when your quote-unquote router dies, everything dies. You can't even send print jobs to the printer from your laptop because your switch is down and your access point is down. So your entire network infrastructure crashes. So after spending all this time explaining to clients why they should break these things out and have a modular network that has redundancy and is not dependent on one another, it's very difficult for me to go back and say, well, but I really think you should take these 4 or 5 things and condense them down into a single box. Additionally, you have to spend money for this additional box because that cloud key cannot be virtualized. One of the things that I think is very advantageous of all of UniFi's lineup is that all of their software can be virtualized, and we often do virtualize it. So we will take the DVR software and we'll run that inside of a VM. And the nice thing about doing it that way is we have the capability of expanding up or down. So if the client all of a sudden adds a bunch of cameras and they want to go back further in time and they want all that video recorded at 1080p, we can just assign more hard drive space, assign more processors, assign more memory. And we can scale up or down because it's a VM. It also means that we can run it on bare metal if the installation is big enough. And that's something that you just don't see with the Bosches and the Sonys and the competition to the UniFi system. So I like that part of it. I also like the fact that you can have a single physical server and you can run a UniFi controller on one virtual machine, the NVR on another one, and you essentially build this virtual array of network appliances, all of which are modular, interchangeable, and reconfigurable at any time. And so by going to the single monolithic unit, you eliminate a lot of your options. But I think it is good for the people that are starting out and just starting to play with some of this stuff. I think it's a great way to go. So I hope that helps you, Tyler. Like I say, if not, you can always get back to us, asknoahshow.com. You can email us live at asknoahshow.com. Thanks so much for reaching out. We really appreciate it. Second email comes from Peter. So Peter writes into the show, and get Peter's email pulled back up here. Peter says, at work, I'm trying to configure a Cisco Catalyst 2950 switch that is being used in an isolated network. Originally, it consisted of one Windows server and 9 workstations, all of them with static IPs. And I'm trying to set up a Linux server to replace the Windows server, and I want to hand the IPs out via DHCP. But for some reason, the workstations cannot see the Linux server, even though both are on the same VLAN. I don't have much experience configuring Cisco switches, and I haven't been able to find the solution using Google. Any ideas? So I actually threw this chat room in our Telegram group, which if you're not in, you should join telegram.asknoahshow.com. And there was a lively discussion. And what did you guys, holy cow, the Mumble Room has just blown up. What did you guys find if anybody was in there for that discussion? Mumble Room? Anybody? Well, I'll tell you where I would start troubleshooting while I wait for somebody to chime in if they're here. Where I would start troubleshooting is with the basics. So first I would unplug the Cisco switch and I would plug all of them into just like a little dumb Linksys switch or D-Link switch and see if you have interconnection that way. And once I've confirmed that you have interconnection that way, then the next thing I would do is I'd go back and say, let's try without any of the VLAN stuff, just connecting all of this with the Cisco switch. Because the first thing you want to eliminate is there a problem with any of the servers or with any of the clients or all of the above? Let's figure all that out. Once we've eliminated that, then let's try to figure out if there's an issue with if there is, in fact, an issue with the configuration of the Cisco switch, or if there's an issue somewhere else. And so I would try just with the blank Cisco config and see if that works. Now, the way that VLANs work in Cisco land is pretty simple. You literally go to the terminal, man, how deep do we want to get into this? When you go, Cisco switches have what they call the configuration terminal, or conft. And when you go to that mode, you're able to assign information to the switch itself. So you'd go into your configuration terminal, you'd go into the switch port, so switch port, 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, and you'd simply assign it the VLANs, VLAN 1, VLAN 2, VLAN 3. And that's really all you should need to do for those specific ports to all exist within their own little virtual network. Now, once you get into wanting to connect these switches to other switches and having VLAN traffic be tagged and pass between switches through trunk ports and stuff like that, then it gets a little bit more complicated. But for your setup, what you've described thus far, all you should have to do, if everything works when you plug it into the regular Cisco switch without anything connected, and all you've done is assign VLAN port numbers, and it's not working, I would argue that there's probably something wrong with your Cisco switch. One of the things that somebody in our chat room had recommended, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is start with your basic troubleshooting steps as far as, can you ping one device to the other? There's also tools that will allow you to essentially sniff DHCP traffic. And so you might consider installing something like that and taking a look at the DHCP traffic and seeing if it's an issue with your DHCP server. And you can move on and troubleshoot from there. But anytime I'm troubleshooting networks, my general piece of advice, again, there's a million things that could lead to that particular problem, but my general rule of advice, anytime you're troubleshooting networks, is try to simplify the network as much as possible, and then slowly add complexity back into your network until you discover the problem, and whatever step that happens in, that's where I would concentrate on. And it is not above Cisco switches to just be weird once they get a config. I have a switch right now in our shop that anytime you apply any sort of configuration to it whatsoever, it will not pass traffic to whatever the gateway is. It just, traffic can't leave the switch. It won't, it's a very strange issue. And we've tried resetting it and doing all sorts of things, and we just can't seem to fix it. And so it's an older switch, so I don't really care. But that's my suggestion to you is break that stuff up and see if you can play with it that way. Again, phone lines are open tonight, 1-855-450-6624. You can join us in our interactive Mumble Room, mumble.jupiterbroadcasting.org. Mumble Room, like I was saying before, it looks like it blew up in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 people in the Mumble Room. It's great that all of you could make it. Just so you guys know, Mumble Room is up and alive. You don't have to ping in the chat room, anything like that tonight. I've just got you guys up. I just want to have a conversation about Linux or anything you want to talk about. Just go ahead and bring it up. Otherwise, I do have a couple things prepped here, and I'm just going to keep going through feedback and stuff like that. It's all about the community tonight. Peter writes in from California. He says, "Hey Noah, thanks for all you've done for the Linux community. I currently have a Fedora home server running Cfile, Duplicity, Emby, and a UniFi controller. I'm thinking about virtualizing the server on CentOS, KVM, and virt-manager. My question is this: will there be additional maintenance for this server? Right now, I run DNF upgrade once a week, which is pretty minimal. Let's say I have 5 guests. I need to provide updates to each one of the guests individually by logging in through SSH. Or is there a program that can at least be somewhat automate this? Thanks, and keep it up, from California." Well, Peter, here's the thing. The short answer to your question is yes, we are going to add some work, some complexity, and some difficulty to your update process because, yes, you're correct. If you've got 5 servers, as far as software updates are concerned, you have 5 servers. You no longer have a single server. It would be as if you purchased 5 individual boxes and installed an operating system, and then each of your 5 individual server on these 5 individual boxes. Now, that is both a positive and a negative. First, let me explain why that is beneficial to you. The reason that it is beneficial to you is because you now have the ability to update one of those boxes without updating all of those boxes. You have the ability to say, hey, in this particular case, I have the UniFi machine that needs an update, but I have the, this duplicity box over here that I'm not sure how it's going to update. Or in my case, and what I run into quite frequently is, this is an unimportant machine. It doesn't have any mission critical stuff on it, so let's keep it as up to date as possible to minimize security concerns. Then I have this box over here that it is not mission critical, and so it's a great testing bed for me to see, does this latest update break anything? And before I quote, steal anyone's thunder, I'll bring in Eric, the IT guy. Hey man, welcome back to the Ask Noah show.
Hey Noah. So I had a couple of thoughts in mind.
Sure.
I've got a similar setup at home. I'm running Fedora and then libvirt with a couple of guests on top. So my first thought was if you want to go the easy route, just use a tool like Tmux and have multiple sessions going at the same time. So with Tmux, it's a terminal multiplexer, is what they call it. But it's basically you can open multiple panes in your terminal and SSH into each of those boxes, and then you can synchronize those panes so that you type in the command once, and that command replicates across all of your panes. So you log into all 5 systems and run your DNF update.
It's a fantastic tool, isn't it?
Oh, I have Tmux installed everywhere for work, for home, for my DigitalOcean environment. I've got panes everywhere. And then as GDog mentioned in the chat, my more technical answer and my preference nowadays would be to just have an Ansible playbook where you'd have an inventory file that listed all of the all 5 or I guess 6 of the hosts if you count the actual virtual machine host.
Yeah.
And then it would just run updates through a playbook.
And to be clear, I have set up environments in which the host itself is not exposed to the outside network. Just the virtual guests are. So we pass a network card through that acts as the virtual switch bridge to the guests. And by doing so, then we have another network card that is specifically on the host, and that machine isn't directly exposed to the internet, and we can limit a lot of the exposure and minimize some of the security risks. Brandon is also with us in our Mumble Room. Brandon, you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, well, Eric took my answer. Ansible would absolutely be the way I handle this. Like today, so at home, I'm managing, 20 virtual machines, plus my 4 physical laptops, and then my 3 hypervisors. So I use Ansible to update those on a fairly regular basis. Actually, I just have use an open source project. It's an open source project that's what's used as the basis for Ansible Tower. and that does all the scheduling, and it handles all the inventory for me of all those servers.
Why Ansible? Both of you gave me the same answer. What is so great about Ansible, and why Ansible over some of the other alternatives like Puppet, for example?
So for me, it's mostly preference. So Puppet has its own special programming language. It kind of looks a lot like, in my opinion, some people may disagree with this, but it kind of looks a little like Ruby. So it kind of can get pretty complex. What I like about Ansible is it's really, really simple. Like if I've sent a playbook that people have no idea what Ansible is, but they can tell me right away what that playbook does without having any knowledge of Ansible. Like they probably have a Linux knowledge, but they have a deep, but they don't have any exposure to Ansible at all. But they can still look at a playbook and tell me exactly what it does.
How hard is Ansible to get set up and running? Like, let's say I'm going to go play with this. I'm going to set this up from start to finish. I have no experience with Ansible at all. What am I looking at? Because the word Ansible, I don't know. There's just something about it that makes it sound techie and programmy and complicated and difficult.
Well, actually, Brandon was the one who turned me on to Ansible, and he walked me through the process over Telegram in about 5 minutes.
And you paid him back by stealing his thunder.
Yes, that's what I usually do.
So from Ansible, we'll go through it really quick. So it's a YAML file. So it's broken down. So your inventory and then essentially the tasks you want to complete. Like that's essentially what it is. That's what Ansible looks like. An Ansible playbook looks like. But then all you need to get started, so like the clients, the ones that are executing this, all I need is SSH access. So be able to do key exchange, for example. So you just need to do key exchange between the system that is executing the playbook and the target. And the target system just needs to have Python installed. And 99% of Linux servers I've worked on have some version of Python installed by default. So you can get started really fast with it. Some complaints with Ansible that it's slow. It can be slow, but if you write your playbooks correctly, it can be really fast, and it can scale really easily with projects like AWX. AWX is the Ansible Tower project I mentioned, the open source Ansible Tower.
That's very cool.
I think so Ansible's I love Ansible. I recommend it to everyone. If you manage more than 4 servers, I think it's worth it to learn, just because it's agentless, so you don't have to install anything on the target servers. So makes it super easy. And then the Ansible and then on the for lack of a better word, the Ansible master just needs to have the Ansible package installed. So that's it, and you just need to build an inventory file and then your playbook and your playbooks.
That's very cool. One Dabble in our chat room in Pound Ask Noah show over on Freenode posts a copy of his playbook, and this is for machine inventory, and we'll have that linked for you in the show notes. But essentially, it's from what I understand, this is a would you call them scripts, or are they just playbooks?
So what a playbook essentially ends up doing is it ends up executing Python code. It actually ends up executing a Python script. So the playbook itself is just a descriptor to tell Ansible what to execute, and then and that's why Python has to be on the
receiving end.
On the receiving end, so that it can actually execute the Python code.
I tell you what, I really like the fact that this runs agentless. To me, the ability to not have to go out and touch a bunch of servers, and that means that there's really no risk for somebody to go out and try Ansible, because if it ever stops working for you, if you decide to go with another solution, all you have to do is get rid of your Ansible master machine. You've not really touched any of the other machines. I'm assuming it's doing this remote execution over something like SSH.
Yeah, it's just doing it over SSH. And also what's really cool, one of the new things that I've been dabbling in with Ansible is managing network equipment. So one of the things that it's really good at now is managing like Cisco or F5 load balancers. So there's a ton of modules inside of Ansible to do that.
Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. And, you know, as we look, I was talking, I think last week at some point, we were talking about the idea that distance between network equipment and servers is rapidly closing, right? Because today, switches, edge devices, they're all essentially mini computers, and most, if not all of them, are running Linux. And so you really become a system administrator and a network engineer all at once. And so having a tool to manage all of these things all at once, from everything from your network equipment down to your servers, is fantastic. Now, if that ties into legacy network equipment, that's even better.
Yeah, and also storage. Like you can also use it to manage storage, like ZFS pools. Like I'm thinking like a FreeNAS. You can also use it to manage LVM, manage legacy like NetApp storage. It's pretty powerful. And then there's a lot of really cool stuff inside of like RHEL or CentOS that they're calling trying to remember what the name of the feature is, but basically like if you want to quickly set up like a free IPA server, for example, on CentOS or RHEL, there's now the ability to just create a free IPA server with Ansible.
That's very cool. Brandon, I have to ask you, you have, how many VMs did you say you had? 30?
So in my house, I have 20.
So that is a lot of VMs. And I guess I'm just going to ask, because I know there's somebody else out there listening to it and go, man, 20 VMs, it's crazy. What are you running that on? What does that host computer look like?
So it's 3 servers, Xeon Ds, Xeon D 1518s. So they're 4-core, 8 threads, and each has 64 gigs of memory. And each server has a 1 terabyte SSD. Now, 1 terabyte usable, because what I'm doing is I'm using Gluster to to replicate the storage across all 3, so that if one dies, it's not a big deal. But I have it distributed across all 3, so I have like 10 running on one, 10 running on another, and 10 running on another. And if I need to rebalance or whatever, they just live migrate between those servers.
That's so very cool.
Yeah, and I'm just running things like Cfile. So I've been running Cfile for like 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And then I have a bunch of other stuff like Plex. I also have an MB server. That's what I love about having this infrastructure. I can test out as many things as I want, but a lot of stuff I actually really use, like my Plex server, Cfile. I have a Windows virtual desktop if I need to use it. Another Linux virtual desktop if I need to use it too.
You know what's interesting about that is I was just having a discussion with a gentleman today, totally unrelated to the program, but we were having a conversation and he calls me up, and I don't know that he has a great insight into what I do for a living, much less what we do here on the show, but he gave me a call and he said, have you ever heard of Nextcloud? And I said, yeah, man, I love my Nextcloud instance. And he said, yeah, I just got done setting it up at home and it's really great. And I'm doing all these really cool things with it. And talked to me about some of the issues that he ran into. And I said, just something to be concerned or just to take note of. I would be cautious about using Nextcloud to sync a lot of files, especially if they're big files, because some of the underlying technology I have not found to be incredibly robust. And I said, maybe you want to check out Cfile. That's kind of what I'm using to sync these files and kind of replace Dropbox. And he said, yeah, I'm going to check that out. That sounds really cool. Brandon, I'm interested in your thoughts. Is that a good recommendation? Have you found C-File to be the most reliable file sync solution? And have you had a chance to compare it much to Nextcloud or OwnCloud?
So yes. So let me give you the quick history of my file syncing. So I've been using solutions like that resemble C-File or Nextcloud since 2006.
Oh wow!
So before Dropbox,
Dropbox.
So before Dropbox even existed, it was actually an open source project that Novell put out called iFolder. So I was using that. I was self-hosting that for a long time. It went end of life. The open source project stopped being developed in 2010 or 2011, and I kept running it until like 2014. So it's like about 4 years ago, and I'm like, I gotta find something that worked. And so I looked at OwnCloud. OwnCloud had just I think it was about a year old at that point. I don't remember when OwnCloud came out. I gave it a shot for like 6 months, and it didn't meet my requirements. It had to fit the iFolder paradigm. I had to be able to go into my system and just select any folder I wanted to sync. Like that. That was my main requirement. I didn't want to have to shoehorn the workflow. I made it work, but it worked. And it worked very reliably. Now, C-File ticks all those boxes. I can go into C-File and just say, I want that folder to be synced and it's done.
Okay. And then you wound up on C-File.
Oh yeah, and it's been the most reliable one. So I've never used Dropbox. I've never used any of those.
Chat room is asking if Nextcloud and OwnCloud are the same thing, or what do they offer? Essentially, the short answer is everything was OwnCloud, and when the company OwnCloud started to go a direction that all of the key people didn't particularly care for, they said, we're going to take a code, we're going to fork it, and we're going to continue at the direction that we think we should go. You go ahead and concentrate on commercial and enterprise and stuff like that. We're going to concentrate on writing good code that matters to people who use it and that maintains open source. And essentially, overnight, Nextcloud became the next great thing, and OwnCloud just kind of died. I think it still technically exists, but I don't know of many people that use it.
It's still getting a lot of commits on GitHub. My only issue with both projects, whether if you're talking Nextcloud or OwnCloud, like besides the syncing reliability in the past, I know it's gotten better, but I feel like they try to boil the ocean. Like, let's have a CalDAV server, CardDAV server. Let's also do video chat. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I don't like that.
That's actually what I wish they would focus on, is the CalDAV and CardDAV and WebDAV, because nowhere else can I find a solution that Nextcloud has when it comes to those solutions.
So, so like what I use for CalDAV, I actually just use Zimbra. So I have my email's hosted with a local ISP, and they use Zimbra.
Man,
and
talk about a project I've not heard of for a long time.
Zimbra?
Yeah, I mean that was like, I remember when Zimbra first came out. You know what they were competing against?
Exchange.
Lotus Notes Domino was the thing that when you went to their website, whatever it was, 15 plus years ago, 10 plus years ago, whatever it was. When you went to their website, that's what they were primarily competing against back in the day, was Lotus Notes Domino. That's how far back Zimbra goes.
Yeah, I remember that. And this is hosted by a local ISP here in Utah. So I use that, and it's reliable. I like the CalDAV. The CalDAV is very reliable. The CardDAV is very reliable. Syncs on my phone, syncs on my computer. Does a great job with that. What I like about C-File, it's a master of syncing your stuff, and then I prefer stuff that does I prefer tools for the right job. I don't want a Swiss Army knife, because a Swiss Army knife is okay at some things, but it's
it's a spork syndrome. Is it a good fork? Not really. Is it a good spoon? Not really. But it's a fork and a spoon.
Yeah.
Mitfrey, what is Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to talk to Mitfree for a second. What has your experience been with Nextcloud? You've tried it, you've used it, and you said you would wish they'd concentrate more on CalDev?
I used OwnCloud way back in the day when it first came out, and it was great for hosting all my contacts. I have not been happy with any address book out there. I've tried dozens of them, but at least with OwnCloud and now with Nextcloud, you can sync your phones to it, and you don't have to rely on a cloud hosting provider like Google or the plethora of people who want to sign up with them.
So the going back to the discussion I was having with the totally unrelated third party today, he was trying to get the what's the LibreOffice Collabora. He was trying to get Collabora to work, and he was having some difficulty. And I remember when they first announced this, how excited I was to get collaborative document editing and something that could replace G Suite Docs, but that I could self-host. And from day one, I never could get it to work right. And I told him, I was like, well, is it actually a published feature now? Because the last time I tried it, it did not work well. Have either of you had good success using Collabora?
I have.
Both of you have? Brandon, we'll take you first.
So I'm using it with C-File. So C-File can interact with it. And I'm not using the Docker container. So it's not, it's actually the LibreOffice RPMs I was able to get a hold of. They're not Collaboras, they're LibreOffice Online RPMs. So I'm not using the Docker container, and that seems to be working just fine.
So you have a CentOS server, and you've installed the LibreOffice Online, which we'll have linked in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. So you have this LibreOffice Online package installed, and then you have a C-File instance installed on that same server, and you're using... No?
They're separate, so I keep them separate. So they're on two different virtual machines, and they just communicate. There's over network using WebDAV. You have to have using WebDAV with C-File, the built-in WebDAV feature in C-File. It will communicate over WebDAV and open the files. That's basically all it does. So
a person, though, that's trying to set this up as simply and straightforward as possible, they would probably put it on a single machine, though.
Yeah, they could. Yeah.
And when you set this up, you have your LibreOffice Online set up, you have C-File on top of it, and you're just telling C-File to sync the files, or you're telling, I suppose, rather, LibreOffice Online to store the files inside of your C-File synced folder.
Yes. So it's a sync. It's writing it to WebDAV, which happens to be that sync folder.
So let me ask you this, because that just gives me an interesting idea and an interesting thought process of how we can go with this. So are you telling me that you have this set up in such a way that you can go to a website, essentially, and look or edit or collaboratively edit your documents, or you can go to a folder that's locally synced on specified computers and call those files up directly inside of a local document editor?
Yes.
That seems like the preferred way to go. I mean, it's, maybe it's a little bit more involved to set up than Nextcloud, all of, 2 more steps, but it seems like it offers you a tremendous amount of more flexibility. Eric, I want to go to you, talk to you for a second. What were you about to say before I got into it with Brandon?
Well, I was kind of echo what Mitfree was talking about. Nextcloud seems to work pretty well for my current scale, as far as file size, number of files, that kind of thing. And yeah, they do have, I think they call them plugins for calendar and tasks. And I tried going that route to eliminate both Apple and Google in one swoop. But what I found was that, at least from the web interface, those plugins were pretty limited. For instance, I can get so wrapped up in a task that I forget that I've got another appointment. So under iOS, I have the ability to tell it my starting location and tell me how long it will take to drive from my current location to my next appointment. So it'll actually trigger an alert 10 minutes before I'm supposed to leave instead of, say, 10 minutes before I'm supposed to arrive at my destination. So that was one feature that was missing. It's been suggested on their GitHub, but it's been open for some time and hasn't gotten any attention. And then probably the more surprising feature I can remember, I tried this about 3 or 4 months ago, was tasks. Their tasks plugin from the web interface, at least, didn't support recurring tasks. And I mean, there's things I do daily, there's things I do weekly and monthly that would be really, I feel like they're essential to have that functionality, but it's just missing from Nextcloud tasks. So I'm on Brandon again. Brandon's been giving me all kinds of ideas from my home lab, and on Brandon's recommendation, I'm going to give Zimbra a try once I migrate to Cfile, especially if I want to start moving large audio and video files around coming in the near future.
Let me give you something else to consider, Eric, and Brandon. I'd love to get your take on this as well. Everybody seems in on getting rid of Google and getting off the Google juice. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We didn't dive into it super deep, but do either of you have opinions on Helm? To give you a short refresher, Helm is the startup that's taking on Gmail. Essentially, it is a $500 device that you purchase, you install in your home, and it, using a mixture of onboard storage on this device, a cloud instance hosted in Amazon, will store all of your email in encrypted at rest, connect with a VPN and an encrypted tunnel back out to their cloud services, and use that AWS instance to interface with the rest of the world. So you don't have to worry about configuring your firewall. You don't have to forward any ports. You don't have to worry about malicious traffic hitting your network. Everything is occurring through this encrypted VPN tunnel from this AWS instance over to this box. It's essentially a mail appliance as a service. It's a two-pronged approach. You buy the appliance so you have all the data. It's all stored locally. You sync to it locally, all of those kinds of things. But there is a cloud component that allows you to talk out to the world. Have either of you heard of this, played with it, or plan to order it?
So I saw it. I like the idea, but I would rather be able to pull down the software and run it on my own infrastructure without buying the box. I'm currently hosting my email with an ISP that I trust, so I'm not managing my email right now anyway. I don't want to manage email. I find that to be very tedious.
Yeah, you and me both.
So, but I like the idea of it, but I don't mind paying for it. I mean, I wouldn't mind paying a yearly subscription for the software. Like I already pay more than $100 a year for my email.
Right.
So it's I'm willing to pay the price, but I'd like to run the software on my own infrastructure. That's it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I don't. I think they're misreading their audience for a couple of reasons. So the first thing is, I work with clients. I work for a large corporation, and they have 2 full-time mail administrators, people that their only function in life is to make sure that this mail server stays up and running, and they don't have email. I'd say at least 4 or 5 times out of the year, something happens, the mail server goes down, and for a stretch of hours, they don't have any email. So for my business, that would be just totally detrimental. I can't run an IT consulting business without email. It's just not something I can do. And so email is a high priority for me. And like you, Brandon, I've managed enough mail servers in my life to know that I never want to manage a mail server as long as I live. Email was just not designed for 2018. It is susceptible to so many issues and problems and spam and filtering and security firewall considerations that I could never want to deal with that. The thing that appeals to me about this device is it has the ease and simplicity of G Suite with the privacy and ownership that would come with a self-hosted solution without the headaches. So I feel like everything that you just described as a downside to hosting your own email, they are addressing, while at the same time providing you with everything that you guys had indicated you wanted in a self-hosted service. Are they not?
No, they are. I like the idea of it. I just don't want to buy their hardware.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's
fair. And honestly, a lot that was the article that we have. I will throw this back in the show notes too. So if you want it, head over to podcast.asknoahshow.com. We'll have this linked in there as well. The number one criticism from the article from Ars Technica is, in fact, that are you going to be able to find users that want to upfront the cost of $500 to what they equate to will become a paperweight if this company ever falls under? Because without the cloud component, this hardware device is essentially useless. And so do you really want to buy a $500 device that could potentially be a paperweight if this whole business plan doesn't work out? And I'm not sure they're wrong.
That right there is exactly why I wouldn't purchase it. I mean, I don't mind using someone else's hardware. I prefer it to run on my own. But what happens when they go out of business? That's just not something. As someone who owns not one but two small consulting businesses, I can't be down. If I miss an email, I could miss an event, and I could lose a client. That's just not really an option for me.
1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. Emailer writes, "Hey Noah, I'm working to get some video for our church services. We'd like to start with just streaming it in the building, nursery, and a couple of other rooms with a goal to record and possibly stream it on our website in the future. We're currently running this on a laptop with Windows and PowerPoint to project. So I'm trying to ease a little Linux in here. I was looking for a little guidance on speccing out an affordable open broadcaster machine for cameras. What should I be looking at? We'll probably look at 2 cameras and an input from the projector machine. Any help could be appreciated." Well, you asked the right group of guys, that's for sure. I would tell you this. As far as what to look for in an actual physical box, I would strongly consider and look at a gently used Optiplex. And the reason I say that is because it is a very high-end desktop device that you're going to be able to pick up for just a couple $100. When it goes to capture device, you actually have a number of different choices. The best choice, obviously, is to use a PCI-based capture device. So that would be a device that goes into the PCI slot, because you're able to take advantage of that PCI bus and the bandwidth that comes with it. That's often not a cost-effective option. So in your case, you're probably looking at USB capture devices. Now, in that regard, you have a couple of options. The first and the best is a 1080p HDMI capture device. Now, the one we recommend is from a company called Madwell. We'll have a link for you in the show notes. It costs about $299, but the advantage is you are able to take any camera that outputs a 1080p device and bring that natively into your computer and then subsequently stream it. Obviously, you could put 2 or 3 of these and you would be able to pull 2 or 3 camera shots in. The downside to doing it this way, USB buses do have bandwidth limitations, and so I will tell you from experience what you're probably going to find is you're going to get no more than 1 or 2 cameras per USB bus. Now, there's a couple of ways to kind of cheat that problem. The easiest, most cost-effective way is to purchase what we call a 4-bus USB controller. And this is essentially a PCI card that has 4 individual USB buses on them, and each port is connected to a bus. Thus, you are able to connect 4 of these capture cards to a single computer and not run out of USB bandwidth. Well, Noah, how will I know if I run out of USB bandwidth? Well, it's pretty simple. You'll start having devices drop off of your computer. All of a sudden, you'll lose the picture on one, or you'll lose the audio inside of your audio capture device, so on and so forth. Now, if you can't afford to buy some of these high-end capture cards, because $300 a pop, that's going to, it's going to add up if you get 2 or 3 of them, right? And you're going to need one for you're for sure going to need one for the PowerPoint, and then one for each camera, so on and so forth. One way to get around that is to use good quality USB cameras. And so the camera I would recommend would be something like a Logitech C920 or a Logitech C930. Now, these are 1080p USB cameras at 30 frames per second, so they will look absolutely fantastic. Now, the great thing about these cameras are they're only about $68. And so you can get, and we have done it in churches, you can get a broadcast grade system for under $1,000 if you spend your money carefully. Eric, you had some thoughts on this. Go ahead.
One of the solutions I was thinking about from sort of the graphical end was and the name just left me. There's some software that works great for putting lyrics over the top of your camera shots. We use our church uses ProPresenter, which is closed source and subscription based. But I've been watching the market, and there's been a few projects that aren't quite there yet, but they're open source and they do the same thing.
Charlie Brown AU in the chat room points out that the Logitech C920 and C930s have hardware encoding and processing built into the camera itself, so it doesn't rely on the CPU to do the encoding and decoding. That's true. And so, again, the Logitech system, you're going to have a hard time beating that as far as cost competitiveness goes. Obviously, just to fully flesh this all the way out, you'll install the Open Broadcaster software. It's a free set of software that will allow you to do a live broadcast from your computer. In fact, it's how we're broadcasting the Ask Noah show right now. So the chat room that you see in front of you in the video, it's capturing that from a second machine. Excuse me. It also is streaming that out and simultaneously recording it. Now, the capture from the chat room is happening on the same computer that I'm streaming out from. You might not be capturing a chat room, but you might capture your presentation. Of course, we're going to recommend you do that inside of LibreOffice, not inside of PowerPoint, but you get the idea. You'll be able to capture that screen, and then you'll be able to create a graphic by which you can then present that out to the rest of your church. So you will mirror essentially the display, and you will go into the OBS configuration and tell it, on the second display, don't show me all of the controls, just show me the video output. And it will allow you to create a very seamless, essentially broadcast inside of your church. And of course, you have the ability to record it and release it later as a podcast, which of course we do at podcast.asknoahshow.com. The reason I point out that as an option is because you don't have to necessarily purchase a capture card if the content you're capturing is running on the same computer as the OBS machine. And that's what we're doing here on our system. We're capturing it on the same machine. The downside is you're going to eat up CPU. The upside is you don't have to buy another $300 capture card. But let me point this out. On our machine right now that we're broadcasting at 30 frames per second at 1080p, capturing the chat room, embedding that, creating the little Ask Noah animation thing that's in the background, all of that amounts to all of 22.6% of our 4th gen i5 processor. That's how robust and lean OBS is. I mean, the software just literally sips CPU. So you should never really run into an issue there. Eric in the chat room says that you're using OBS and a C920.
Yeah, for when I'm doing audio, mostly, I've got a Logitech C920 on an arm attached to my desk, and I pipe that through OBS, and I've got my intro and outro music set up as a scene. So, and then those scenes are tied to to a number pad that I have, so I can just hit 1 when the show starts, hit 2 when I do my intro and that kind of thing. So it's pretty. I don't want to say automatable, but you can make it pretty volunteer friendly. So I mean, the same podcast setup could easily be adapted to a house of worship.
Oh, it's fantastic. And we've actually put this into many a house of worships. I'm also going to include a link inside the show notes. Again, you can get those show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. A link to one of my favorite audio interfaces. It's the Lexicon Alpha. It's an extraordinarily high quality capture device. The thing that makes this what I consider to be better, but certainly different than the traditional Focusrites or the AudioBox USB, any of those. This device will allow you to capture audio without amplifying it. And so it makes an ideal interface if you're going from a church soundboard, for example, into your broadcast system, because you don't want to be re-amplifying any of that audio. It's already been amplified and properly leveled and normalized as it came into the board. Mumble, we just got a couple of seconds left here before our music comes in and kicks us out for the hour, but I just wanted to say thanks so much for joining and chatting and just having a laid-back community night. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
It's been great.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Fantastic. Again, we've got a bunch of special episodes coming up. We've got a bunch of interviews that'll be going on the rest of the week. Head over to AskNoahShow.com. There you'll find our upcoming schedule. We got Patrick McBride from Red Hat. We've got Jason from WireGuard. We've got our Brain Trust Party. That's going to happen Tuesday at 3 p.m. And finally, Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central at the Tamarack Tap Room in Woodbury, Minnesota, we will have our party celebrating 100 episodes of the Ask Noah Show, and that is primarily thanks to you, the listening audience. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Hey, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Ask Noah Show. That's where you can stay up to date and find the latest. Head over to AskNoahShow.com. There you'll be able to have links to all of the resources on the show. Of course, podcast.asknoahshow.com is where you'll find the show notes, all of the articles, any of the products we talked about. The Ask Noah Show continues next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. Huge thanks to Ben, our producer, Sarah, our call screener. This hour of the show may be over, but there's plenty more content for you 24/7 at AskNoahShow.com.